You guys like that intro. I just made it real quick since I had some time. Exams are coming. I was hoping to upload a couple videos before my exams would come out. Um, Hope you enjoyed this one. This was actually, I don't know if I explain it properly, but basically I have a Discord now. I have a lot of subscribers joining the Discord. Well, not that many. I'm hoping more later. And obviously I take, you know, ideas from the Discord. If you guys have any suggestions for the content I can make, I have a decent amount of experience with computers. I also have experience with cars if you guys are interested in that. Excuse me. And anything in between. So if you guys enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Today we're talking about a subject that was actually given to me by one of my subscribers. I'm so happy to finally have subscribers joining my Discord and finally having subscribers actually helping me out with making new content. One of my subscribers, whose name I'm not quite sure, he talked about buying a new Chinese-based Xeon computer, and he's been asking me about a lot of subjects. Number one was the subject that what kind of graphics cards would bottleneck what kind of platforms, and effectively it's just CPU bottlenecking 101. Okay, I don't really thought I should get in depth with it, but it seems as though a lot of my viewers don't necessarily know how CPU bottleneck works and what to look out for. So effectively, in a computer, you always have a bottleneck, okay? If it's your RAM, then you're going to have some issues with your CPU. CPU is not going to perform as well as you were hoping so. If it's your CPU, well, then your gaming and other tasks will take longer than expected, and the whole experience won't be as snappy as possible, and sometimes you'll even have large frame drops, frame time issues, all that good stuff. What else? If you have graphics card bottlenecking, well, then you're gonna have a stable game, but you won't be able to run at max graphics or max resolution, things like that. So that's the basics, and you might even have hard drive issues. Hard drive issues are kind of hard to tell sometimes. Sometimes you think it's a CPU, but in reality, it's your hard drive, and that's just loading times and other good stuff like that. Like, for instance, you'll have Explorer.exe loading, and that kind of feels like your CPU isn't able to calculate what you're doing, and that's why your Windows is so slow, but in reality, it's actually your hard drive. Your hard drive can't really load up what you're asking to do, and so yeah, your whole system feels really slow. So, CPU bottlenecking in terms of 2021 gaming, so anything pre x58, so that can be AM3, AM2 plus. AM1 is actually somewhat recent, and it's kind of a garbage platform. Don't buy that platform if you're planning on gaming. FM2, Core 2 Quad platform, so anything LGA 775. All of these platforms I don't suggest running in terms of brand new games. Okay, they're already off limits. Core 2 Quads will sometimes perform okay in modern games, although they will need a significant overclock. They're just not pushing the cache per core and cache efficiency that new games are asking. Not necessarily in terms of single core process, but in terms of single core performance, just in terms of the latency of the whole CPU. It's not really on par with other stuff. That's why x58 is actually kind of meta. x58 has better latency than has actually better single core performance. I think around the same latency, so it kind of makes up for the latency issues with the single core performance. At the time, it was the most powerful pre-AVX CPUs, and they also boasted with a lot of cores, so that's why I can say x58 is worth it. However, I don't think even buying like 2 times quad core Xeons and then overclocking them to shit, I don't think that would even be close to meta in terms of computers that are worth the dollar. So x58 is the lowest I'm going to talk about today. I think that x58 in 6-core generation is very good for today's gaming. For quad-core, however, I don't suggest running all kinds of GPUs on them. I think that they're good for mid-range graphics cards, but they will not be able to compete in terms of the high end. Don't pair up a quad-core first generation i7 to a GTX 1080 Ti per se. That's just going to give you some serious bottlenecks in a lot of games, especially games that you expect to play. Up next is the 990FX series. The 990FX is kind of weird, and I have a love-hate relationship with them. Yes, I'm running 990FX today. The FX8350s are the lowest I can say to run. 990FX will actually run worse in a lot of games than your X58 quad cores. That's something you have to consider. 990FX tries to make up for its lack of single core performance with its clock rate, its voltage regulation and like voltage handling, and also its cores. Okay, it has a whole lot of modules. Okay, it's running 4 modules, which is 8 cores effectively. Okay, we can debate all day about it, but effectively you're running 8 threads, you're kind of running 8 cores. Okay, because of this aspect and the fact that you can be running your CPU at 5 gigahertz, I suggest running around the same amount of GPU performance as X58. Personally, I'm going a little over that. I have 2 R9 Furies, so my performance is a little bottleneck, but in terms of new games, you'll actually be utilizing more threads and utilizing more of your CPU than even X58. X58, if you're running like an SR2 motherboard and running 2 Xeon 6 cores at 4, 4.3, 4.5, 4.7, 5 gigahertz even, you're going to be having as much performance as a brand new i9 9900K or 10700K, but because of the aspect that it has more threads and more cores, it's not necessarily going to be utilizing all of that. So I think 990FX has its small niche, being cheaper than X58, and also having more threads and having potentially better overclocks at times. So 990FX is around the same range as X58, and it's cheaper, so it's something to consider. X79 and X99 I think are the last I'm going to talk about today. I might even talk about Z series, but X79 and X99 have pretty interesting characteristics. So firstly, they're not going to be like, you can run server grade 6 cores and 8 cores, which means that they're locked in terms of frequency, and that's not very good for us gamers because you see, frame times demand a large amount of clock rate. The more clock rate you have, the better your frame times are going to be, the better your stability will be, and the better FPS you will get. Everything is really based off of frame times in terms of CPUs. So buying a Xeon low clock rate, like let's say 2.5, 2.8 gigahertz, that's not necessarily going to be great for your gaming experience. However, a lot of games are pretty stable at 2.8 to 3 gigahertz, so it really depends on the game. However, X79 and X99 also have overclocking in their i7 Extreme series. So in terms of X79, you could be running 4820K, you could be running a 3930K, which I suggest the 3930K over the 4820, but I do suggest the 4930K over the 3930K. Kind of a weird flip-flop there. All these CPUs are pretty good in terms of modern gaming. They perform around the Ryzen 2600 overclocked range, even when they're overclocked. So around when you're running 4.6 gigahertz, you're going to be running around the Ryzen 2600 at 3.8, 3.9 gigahertz. No, sorry, I'd say 4.1 actually, 4.2, like closer to that range. The actual IPC increase in Ryzen 2000 isn't that significant over Sandy Bridge, Ivy Bridge, Haswell, and Broadwell. So X79, really worth looking into. It's cheaper than X99. Runs DDR3 RAM, and you can run really fast DDR3 RAM pretty easily on decent boards. Boards are cheaper, especially overclocker boards are way cheaper than the X99. I don't know why X99 is so expensive in terms of overclocking boards. And finally, it has just as many PCIe lanes, although some X79 don't have PCIe 2.0 support, which is kind of weird. And forget about X58 and 990FX. They don't even support PCIe 3.0. Although X58 will have more PCIe lanes on their high-end overclocking boards than any of these, okay, that we're talking today. So, things to consider about the platforms, about CPU bottlenecking, about GPU bottlenecking. I think X79 and X99 can be paired to just about any graphics card today. Now, that's with the overclocking i7 Extremes. If you're looking at non-i7 Extremes, like your Xeons, stuff like that, it's closer in terms of performance to your 990FX and X58. So I would say mid-range is fine, high-end, watch out. And when I'm talking about like really high-end X79, X99, I don't suggest running like an RTX 3090. There's no point because the 3090 was utterly built for benchmarking and giving the most amount of FPS. So anyways, you're not buying a 3090 and pairing it with an X79 or X99. An RTX 2080 Ti might be worth looking into. Not sure if you're going to get the best performance for it, but if you're running like a high-end X99, which by the way, guys, X99 10 cores 6950X is super cheap these days. That is amazing, guys. 10 cores, 4.4 to 4.6 gigahertz overclocked. They're really good value right now. Not as good value as X299, you'd be surprised, but they're still really good value. I suggest looking into it. If you want an actual X Extreme Edition CPU, definitely suggest it. Finally, let's talk about Z series. There's a lot of Z series CPUs because Intel like to chop up their series and potentially ask people to buy multiple Z series motherboards every time they want to, buy the newest CPU. And so you have Z68, Z77, Z87, Z97, all these motherboards kind of laying around. You don't really know what to do with them. They're quad cores, they're not 6 cores, they're not 8 cores. What do you do? Well, I think that Z68 and Z77 both support Sandy Bridge and Ivy Bridge. These CPUs should only be used around the X58 990FX, around there, and maybe a little more powerful than that, and maybe a little less powerful than X79. So they're around that range, especially overclocked. Non-overclocked, they're actually lower than X58 and 990FX. So only overclocked, then I would suggest them around that performance. In terms of single core performance, it's quite a bit lower than you'd expect. It's just because there's not as much cache per core than X79 and X99, and so that's kind of dropping its performance. For instance, if you bought a 2700K versus a 3820 on the X79, I suggest the 3820. The 3820 has more cache and has better overclocks, although it only runs in BCLK, as I've heard. I'm not quite sure because I've never had one, but from what I understand, that's what you can expect. Moving on to Haswell and Canyon Lake. No, not Canyon Lake. I'm stupid. It's called Devil's Canyon. These two chips are basically identical. So it's all i7 4000 series, and honestly, Z87 and Z97 are kind of irrelevant. So they're kind of in a weird spot. They don't overclock as good as Sandy Bridge. They have better IPC than Sandy Bridge by a little bit, but Ivy Bridge definitely has, around the same IPC. Like, there's not much benefit in going with Devil's Canyon or Ryzen Intel i7 4000. The only thing I could really say that might save your ass if you're trying to run Devil's Canyon is the fact that they have actually pretty good DDR3 overclocking, like the best of their series, and they have some of the best quad core overclocking overall in terms of all these chips. Although Sandy Bridge can have better performance, like a 2500K 5 gigahertz, not that hard. Devil's Canyon and 4000 may actually overclock slightly better because of their better lidding on their chips. Now, if you're delidding, that's not an issue. Like, fuck, just go with Sandy Bridge. But if you're not like that, other aspects of 4000 is that they have better stable overclocks at lower voltages. That might be something you're interested in. But all this argument goes down the drain when you're considering the prices are still quite high. So that's something to consider. Overall, all of these quad cores are just about the same performance, and especially if you're looking at the price, they're literally this like almost the same performance per dollar, and I think all of these don't really deserve any more graphical power than an X79 or X99 board. Don't put anything like GTX, sorry, an RTX 2080 Ti on these. That won't cut it. Like, they won't cut it on most games. Now, if you're playing older games that, you know, might demand a lot of power, they might be good. You know, single threaded, they're not that bad. They're not much worse than Skylake, let's say. Or in this case, not much better, but basically what I'm saying is yeah, all these motherboards, they have similar graphical performance. You can be running at any really any graphics card. The bottleneck will be not that significant other than 990FX. Watch out for that one. 990FX, you have to tune it quite a lot before you even get playable. So that's the one I'd watch out for. Everything else really playable in today's games, especially like even with high-end graphics cards won't really matter. Mid-range graphics cards and low-end graphics cards, it's not even going to be a factor. Okay, that's all I have to say for today, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. Have a good day.